Let's take a look at The Witcher board game. This is a title put out by Fantasy Flight a number of years ago. It is out of print as of this vlog, but I know there's a number of copies out there secondhand. And for those of you who are fans of the franchise, the question, as with any board game, how does it play? What does it invoke in terms of the narrative? And we're going to look at that, really focus on that and some of the unique mechanics of the game. Will it have a place in your board gaming collection? I mean, that's ultimately the questions that I ask in looking to acquire new titles and add to my collection. Mechanically, it's a race-type game. At the beginning of the game, you select one of the characters from the Witcher universe, and you pull out a quest card. The quest card has certain objectives to accomplish, and you get victory points for that. And depending on whether it's a short game, a medium game, or a long game, at the end of the game, when a player has completed a quest, it goes into the end game, and then in the end game, you tally up the victory points and you win. With that race game, you have an overall winner, a secondary winner, a third winner, and a fourth winner. You can have 4 players at a time. It likes to play with all 4 players. It likes to really, really play with 3 players. With 2 players, there's a back and forth dynamic, but then it's going to be obvious winner versus loser, as opposed to maybe first place, second place, third place, and fourth place. So as you move around the board, you gather these clue tokens. And when you get enough tokens, they represent actions in the game. They represent gathering intelligence, exploring cities and various points in the game, so it's more of kind of an abstract marker. When you get enough of these clue tokens, and they have different colors representing different aspects of the game, whether it's combat, whether it's intrigue, whether it's exploration, you then spend these tokens to accomplish part of your quest and gain victory points. Combat is interesting because the dice in the game, which of course, like many dice-based games, represent success or failure, they're custom dice, and each character uses aspects of the dice customization. It's more about not only defeating, the dice allow you to not only defeat a challenge, but possibly also avoid one of the pitfalls of the challenge. For an example, in combat, if I fight a monster, I might need a certain set of symbols to defeat the monster and defeat the challenge, but I'm also going to need a number of set symbols not to take any damage back from the monster, maybe to be kind of paralyzed or poisoned on there. So what's interesting about the dice mechanic, in addition to adding dice to your dice pool, manipulating dice, triggering cards and powers that you might have, is it's not just binary. It's not just roll a d6 and you need a 6 and you passed on there. There are degrees of success and failure, and there are triggers. I really like this mechanic. This type of mechanic is interesting because it utilizes the full potential of custom dice. If you're playing a game with custom dice, I don't want it to just be a variant on a d6 or a d8. I want it to trigger special effects. I want it to trigger unique things in the game, and Witcher does that perfectly. That's the mechanics. Now, the narrative production quality is fantastic. The miniatures are fantastic. The cards that involve the various quests and various things you can encounter in the game are very well done with the graphics, the size of them. They're a little bit oversized. It has tabletop presence. Within the narrative, what I enjoy is as you move around on your turn, and you can spend action points to fight a monster, to explore, to move. What's interesting is as you explore, you can draw from one of 3 decks. So naturally your character might want to be able to fight, or your character might be able to use intrigue, or your character might be able to explore based on the skill sets, but you always have a choice. And completing one of these cards or completing one of these quests gives you the skill tokens. The narrative of the card, it's essentially a test. I mean, it could just be text where you flip over a card and it's like, roll these dice, and if you get 3 successes, you gain a token. That's the mechanic on there. And of course, you can manipulate the dice by utilizing certain powers to change them. But the graphics of the card, pulling you into the Witcher universe, the background, the narrative, there's a little bit of a flavor text on there. It is very well done. So you flip these cards over and you feel like things are happening. You feel like you're encountering something. And in my mind, this is where the game, all well-done games do this. This game does it so well. If I look at the mechanics, if I look at the flow chart, it's a pretty simple game on there. It uses custom dice, and you draw these cards, and you resolve them through the dice and through the abilities. I mean, that's not groundbreaking in there. Mechanically, if you just look at it, you're like, well, okay, it's very simplistic. But the narrative and the pieces and the visuals, it really feels like you're in the universe with how it works. And from that perspective, I think it's definitely really, really unique. A secondary mechanic that I enjoy it, but I say secondary because it could be a little bit frustrating for some players out there because you do have the potential to get hit really, really hard. Let's talk about character death in a game. So some games, if you die, you're dead. Let's give some examples here, right? Because if you die, you're dead. That's not really very helpful to try and figure out, is this a game secondhand that you'd like to acquire? A game like Talisman, and I love Talisman on there, so no criticism. When you die, you're dead, and you draw a new character. So you could have tons of gear, tons of everything, leveled your strength, leveled your craft, you got 6 life, you're ready for the crown of command, and you just get smacked down and you're dead. And you're like, what? Dead. Start over. Then we have something like Runebound, which I love Runebound also, so I'm giving kind of real-life examples on here. Runebound, when you get knocked out, your character's still alive, but you lose abilities. And you don't lose abilities, you lose your items, you lose your gear, and you kind of get reset from the beginning. And both of those are racing games. Racing in that you are competing against the other players to accomplish something. In the case of Talisman, it's to get to the crown of command. And in terms of Runebound, it's to get to defeat Margrath or Vorkalesh the Necromancer or whatever the encounter is going to be. Witcher's interesting in that you don't die. As you get hurt, you start flipping over tokens on your abilities. So every character has the ability to move, the ability to explore, the ability to utilize special abilities, whether that's brewing potions or utilizing magic on there. There's also abilities to manipulate other aspects in the game. So as you get wounded, you take penalties, you lose abilities, and you're never really fully taken out. I mean, I guess that represents the Witcher universe on there. I like this mechanic in theory because, one, when you get wounded, you got to figure out where you're going to take that wound. What are you going to start to shut down? What are you going to start to make less effective on there? So it doesn't totally block out a strategy. And at the same time, it keeps you in the game. You don't lose all your victory points. You don't lose any items or NPCs that you found. You don't lose your progress. You're slowed down on there. The challenge is, of course, it is a dice-based game, even with customized dice. You could, just on the luck of the draw. I mean, it's not a Euro on there. You're not micromanaging everything down to the moment where it's a mathematical equation. You could get hurt. You could really get pounded on 2 or 3 turns and get so weakened that being a race game, the time it takes you to rest and recover and sort of get back to fighting action, so to speak, the other players are well ahead on there. So that is a possibility. It's a unique mechanic. I enjoy it, but I understand it could be very polarizing. The final question. Solo play. I love playing board games with a group. The social aspect is amazing, but I also like to wind down and kind of unplug from the digital universe. I love to go analog on there. And in exploring that, one of the questions I like to ask is, can I play this game solo? Can I play this board game by myself on there? Either as is, something like Zombicide, Invader, or Black Plague, you just control all the characters, or with some slight modification, can I change it and see how things can go? Unfortunately, Witcher is not suited to solo. It's a race game. Mechanically, I could play one character and just explore the realm and try to accomplish my objectives on there, or say to myself, hey, I have 5 game turns. I have 10 game turns to accomplish this. Let's see how many victory points I can rack up. I mean, if you loved the narrative so much and it's going to pull you in, I mean, you could. The mechanic allows you to play solo. You can even play 2 characters if you want. But at its heart, it is a race objective game to see which player, which character can become the most famous by racking up these victory points. So by that definition, by that nature, you need someone else to play with. A couple of unique features, but again, nothing groundbreaking, nothing that you're going to see and say, wow, this has never been done before. But what does elevate the game to an interesting play status is the narrative is really tight. The visuals on the cards are fantastic. I mean, you flip them over, you read them. It's got the flavor text, it's got the adventure text, it's got the graphics, and you're like, I feel like something's happening. I feel like something is happening here. And you pick up the custom dice and you think in your mind, okay, what do I have to do now to kind of win this story, win this element? And you roll the dice and you see what you get, success, failure, something in between. On that level, it works.